Don't chase the money bit. That part comes after making work that you truly are so compelled to make. There's something inside of it that has to come out. Chase that work, and I believe the audience and people that will resonate and emotionally connect will find the work.
The art world is always changing. It's a dynamic space where creativity and commerce collide. Finding your path and staying true to your craft isn't easy. Welcome to the Professional Artist Podcast. This show explores what it truly takes to build a meaningful and sustainable art career. Each week, we offer intimate, in-depth conversations that reveal which business strategies actually work, giving you the inspiration and insight to fuel your artistic journey. I'm your host today, Miguel Mayer, and in this episode, we're diving into the world of David Popa, a land artist whose work bridges ancient techniques and contemporary storytelling. Born and raised in New York City and now based in Finland, David creates large-scale earth frescoes using natural pigments like charcoal and soil, captured through drone photography and shared as breathtaking visual narratives. Over the years, he has carved out a unique genre of art that merges adventure, nature, and creativity. His works, often created on remote islands or otherworldly landscapes, are designed to fade back into nature. In this occasion, we're exploring the key moments and lessons that define David's career. Here's what you'll gain from this episode. Creative evolution. David shares how his background in fine art and street art led to the creation of his one-of-a-kind practice, blending natural materials and modern technology. Building a global presence. From a courageous leap of faith to creating viral content, David reveals how he gained international recognition and collaborated with major brands like Apple and Adidas. The power of authenticity. Learn how staying true to his vision and embracing vulnerability helped David build a meaningful and sustainable career. All right, let's explore the world of David Popa. Let's start by getting to know the heart of David's work. He doesn't just create art for galleries or traditional spaces. Instead, his practice takes him outdoors into wild landscapes and remote terrains, where his art blends directly with nature. Here's how David describes it in his own words.
I'm a land artist, and so I basically do large-scale, what we would call ephemeral earth frescoes. And so that's maybe a bit of a mouthful, but essentially I use natural pigments that the cave painters would have used, chalk, charcoal, and earth pigments, and I place it into these sort of household garden sprayers, and I create large-scale, you can also call them earth murals, on the ground, on landscapes, really around the world, from deserts to glaciers to most recently next to a volcano in Iceland. And so I create these large-scale ephemeral. Since it's only water and earth or chalk, they wash away pretty much depending on the landscape on the very next rainfall. And so it's a sort of stunning, exciting adventure to pull it off and just in the nick of time, often before the rain comes, record, document, photograph it, and just live out this sort of adventurous experience. And so my background is in fine arts, and then I discovered street art. And so that's how I learned how to do large scale murals, but then moved to Finland, and the natural landscapes always really pulled me. And so I sort of was like, how can I combine all of my loves together into this one genre, which I didn't think really existed. I just said, well, I guess I'm an adventure artist. I just want to be out in nature. I want to be moving, and I want to be creating this. And I was very interested in photography and film. So how do I combine all these loves into one genre? And there was actually a lot of resistance there initially. I was like, well, shouldn't I just be sticking to canvas and oil paint like my dad taught me to? I grew up in New York City. The pattern of hopping on a subway, a bus, taking an hour to get to school, this rigidness, my dad almost religiously took us out to, so I grew up in New York City, but took us out to Long Island City to this nature preserve. And he would take us out there almost every single weekend. And it was in that space in nature where there was no path. I was probably 6 or 7 years old. It was just what could happen if you went off the path? Like, who could you meet? And at that time, when I was 9 or 10, Lord of the Rings came out. So like the fantasy nature, there was almost a spiritual dimension to all of it, that anything could happen. And so I longed for being in that space. And of course, my imagination then went wild. We used to make films as kids, and we loved that sort of folklore and being out in nature. And so then I went to arts high school. I majored in painting in college, and there was a disconnect there for me. And it took quite many years. It wasn't until I got into street art and learned how to do large scale murals, which was definitely a step in the right direction. But then I was still in an urban context. And so it was sort of a huge leap of faith. And I think if I hadn't met the love of my life in Finland and moved here, so I'm currently in my Finland studio. I've been living here for really my whole professional career, my whole adult life, past like 10 years. Although I have a studio space now, a lot of the sort of creative stuff doesn't happen here. It happens out in nature. And so you have to know yourself and take that leap of faith. And for me, it was quite a leap of faith to just like, I basically took out like a paddleboard onto an islet and just did a massive earth fresco, really like without permission. I knew, of course, I was using natural materials, and lo and behold, it went on national news and things started to sort of snowball from there. But it was a huge, courageous act. And I think it is a big step to really to understand what are your loves and curiosities and who are you innately as a human being, because that's where everything spawns from, right? And for me, I was not happy with the art I was making. Like I would just come home every night, talk to my wife, I'm like, I'm not happy with what I'm making.
That shift toward art that felt truly aligned didn't happen overnight. It was a slow burning pull, a mixture of frustration, instinct, and eventually necessity. This is what led David to step outside the traditional structures that he had been working within. Here's what happened when he followed that inner call and decided to act, not knowing what would come next.
When I moved over to Finland, I fell in love with the country, got married, I have 3 children now. So at the time I had 1 child. It was sort of a sink or swim, feast or famine scenario. So because I was doing the street art and I was quite proficient, like I can do highly realistic, I was relatively known in this sort of street art mini world of Finland, I would get some breakthrough commissions. And mural commissions could range from a couple thousand up to, I think the highest commission I had gotten was close to 18,000. So that one commission could hold me for a couple of months in my family. But there was a unique portion where I was trying to find just more income avenues, and I was doing on and off these shows, these gallery shows. And, you know, you see what people buy. I'm doing these sort of like abstract backgrounds, but I really want to do more figurative elements. And a lot of people just like the abstract backgrounds. And so it came to a head when I had a show, I had to produce like 40 works, and there was no way I was going to produce that many in that amount of time. And so maybe 12 or 13 were going to be purely abstract, which wasn't what I was really interested in. Yes, I myself would like maybe a more non-representational piece on my wall. And I found myself doing basically these 3-hour, very quick abstract pieces. And it came to a head where I was like, this is not what I signed. This is not why I became an artist. And there was this huge pull inside of me because just a couple months earlier, I don't know if anyone knows about the Lofoten Islands in Norway. It's one of the most beautiful places, I would say, in the world. And I went up there with my wife, and that was a seed that was planted that it was like the dream would be to merge art, adventure, and nature together. But it was at this point when I had, you know, essentially was painting paintings one after another. And I realized like, I'm wholly unfulfilled doing this. And it was actually my wife at that time who saw how unhappy I was. And she was like, you've had this idea of merging art and nature together. What's that first step for you? And at that time, it wasn't using natural materials. The ideation, it takes a while. You have to go as artists, like you have to do experiments, weigh the failures, see what's hitting. And at that time, because I was using spray paint as well, because I was doing street art, I ended up doing these pieces on cellophane plastic that were wrapped around trees. And I basically spray painted on these transparent cellophane, plastic wrap. I ended up finding a biodegradable solution. That's a long story. But basically, it was the first time I did work directly inside of nature. And that was the very first step. And it got some traction. But then probably about a year and a half later, the same type of feast or famine situation where I'd maybe get a larger commission or sold some works, but it was never consistent. And I was experimenting with using these natural pigments, just like outside in the garden of our little apartment, while my wife would be like, "You're such a nerd, David. What are you doing tinkering with like chalk and charcoal?" I, at that point, had done a few tests. and the test is like literally like an eye, like, I don't know, 2 feet, just like an eye. And the big shift was taking a drone. And if I could film the drone from the top down, then in theory, I could do like the scale was not limited and location was not limited. I didn't just decide one day, I turned the switch and there was so much ideation. There's so many months of also just a lot of resistance. It could have happened faster, but I was just afraid. Like everything inside of you, it's so counterintuitive. There's so much self-sabotage that happens. You're like, this is not a thing. People don't go out with hand sprayers and spray rocks and do murals on the like rocks. And so it took months to get to the point where then it was strategic pressure. And that was the financial strategic pressure that we were totally broke. And it was like a calling from deep within me. That's the very mysterious part of art, and also my belief in terms of my faith and spirituality. I personally, I'm going to be raw with you, felt like God was like leading me to do a huge piece, and it was of my wife. My wife just a few days ago was even like crying in the corner because she's like, Dave, you have this, like, you have talent and ability as an artist, but like we don't have the income, we don't have the means. And so my translation of that was do a massive somber portrait of my wife with natural materials on an islet in Finland. And when I went on that island, and I literally spent my last money like buying these like pressure sprayers from the local hardware store and getting chalk and charcoal and doing this massive portrait of her, which I had no idea, like, you can't sell the rock. Like, what is, there was, what's the end game? I didn't even have an end game. It's just something that had to come out from me. And I did the portrait. I'd never done something this large. The seagulls come and basically crap all over it. And so like from above, it just like looks like a mess. I couldn't even finish the like eye. And I was like, keep pressing into this, keep pressing this. And then I finished the eye and nose, came back the next day. And that's where the seabirds kind of like to hang out. And I pressed through, and I can't tell you the amount of times it was like 10, 20, 30 times where like everything within me is like, this is a dumb idea, David. Put the sprayers down and go home, go home. And now I know that is like the initiation. That's like passing the portal where the dragon is trying to, like you're on a mission, and when you have this self-talk and you're trying to sabotage, it's usually a sign that you are exactly where you need to be, because you're pushing, that's the threshold of where you have not been yet. That's one leg in the known and one leg in the unknown, and going into the unknown is freaking you out. I think as a lot of us as artists, that's the realm where you make the best work, that it freaks you out. You don't know if you're even capable of finishing this. And then when I flew the drone up, it was amazing. The crap of the birds looked like dynamic brushstrokes that went along with the composition. And the tide kind of went a little bit higher. And it was at that point that it was as if it wasn't really me completely there that made the work. And I was like, I don't even know what to, and I filmed and recorded. So this is the first time that I'm really merging all of my love. So I filmed it, photographed it in the beautiful golden hour light. Like all of my loves came together, and I could not believe. And then I come home and I showed my wife, and she's like, it's great. Like, it's great, David, but we're still totally broke. And so I was like, I got to post it on social media. So I posted. I have like a couple thousand followers. And to be totally honest with you, that was partly major, like doing this is back in 2017, no, maybe 2018. It was probably around 5-6 years ago, did the big turning point. And I had a few thousand followers, and primarily it was due to like, I was following a bunch of other people and unfollowing them. It was like very bad practices in terms of like growing a social media following. But there was a fair amount of people from the street art world that were following me. Anyways, I posted, and the news, like the main national news of Finland, they were like, we want an interview tomorrow morning at your location. And so then all of a sudden that news media, and then all the major news media basically wanted to make a story about like, and so then it was much more holistic. This is so important, I think, for artists to understand, is the entire, like the emotional resonance your art makes, why you're making the work, all that is so powerful. Because then when the story came out, it was a story of me pursuing like my journey as an artist, moving to Finland, falling in love with my wife, like all of that encompasses the work that you see there. And it's my whole life, my life story from New York City into nature. And so it resonated, I think, a lot with people. And I had been seeing one of my artists, amazing realist artist, Jeremy Geddes. He's very famous for the series of Cosmonauts. And I had seen him do these basically limited edition art drops. which were basically selling giclée prints. And it was like, I have nothing to lose. If I literally sell 3 of these, then I can, a week from then, I had my anniversary with my wife, and I couldn't even take her out to dinner. It was so bad. And so I was like, if I even sell a couple of these prints, I can maybe take my wife out. And I basically put my very first art drop together. And the way it looked like was very simple. It was a product page on Squarespace, very simple. And I went crazy on getting everyone that possibly knew about me and my work to let them know that for 48 hours only, they can collect this limited edition print. And so I made an art drop or an event. I made an event, and it was unbelievable. I mean, within the first minute, I had sold 10 of these. They're around 90 euros a piece. And over 48 hours, I sold 114 of these limited edition prints. And yes, there were costs of course, printing it, sending it over. But like within 2 days, I had 10,000 in my account. And I was like, there is no way this is real. And it's not so much about the money thing is huge, but it was that I did it making the art, because I was so afraid to post that. That was like truly me. That was like truly the art I wanted to make. And I remember I shared it, and I was in tears when people really resonated with it, because that was the art that I cared most about, that I had made probably my whole professional career. And it was so deeply personal to me. And so the fact that I had made money and could now that, of course, like invest in my next project, I could not believe that I was able to make a living on my terms, where I can do the exact art that I wanted to make.
In this next part, David reflects on how his work started gaining wider recognition. He talks about the unexpected role of social media in expanding his audience, and how moments of online visibility, paired with press coverage, helped bring his art to new circles.
So it was a perfect storm, and I'm not going to lie about that. I had a lot of friends and family, whether it was from college or people that had been following me on social media for a good many years now. And there's one odd post on Instagram like, hey, I have some of my, paintings that basically hadn't sold in galleries. And, oh, if you want to check it out, here's my website. I sold like 3 works online prior to this. So that's why this was such a huge jump. So if I look at the numbers, maybe around 70% that were really from Finland who bought. Then you have about 30% who was more international, mainly my people who had been following me maybe since college and things of that nature. So there was a bank of people who were waiting for this type of moment. First of all, they can also buy something for $90. That was also crucial, right? And it wasn't over 1,000. The perfect storm, obviously, as I said, like it went into national news. And then a lot of people from this area, which is called in Finland, it's called Lauttasaari. It's this really nice, it's in Helsinki, and it's really this beautiful area, and people love the nature there. People move there for the nature. And so that sort of connection point was crucial. It was in major news and media. So then they came to my Instagram and they came to my Facebook page. And so basically, I remember I had made the announcement, I want to do a 48-hour drop. And there were people that were just kind of dropping the comments. Oh, I'm interested. I think I said in the caption, message me or say in the comments if you're interested. And I just took note of everyone. And so when the drop happened, I went in, I directly messaged, right? At that time, I hadn't built an email list. Now I have an email list and everything is more systematized. That time it was like, anyone I knew I can DM, you were going to get an email anyway. And I would let them know, I'm releasing it in an hour. This is the link. Make it so easy for them. It wasn't hard for me to then tell everyone I knew about it. And I also was so broke. So it was like, I got to take my wife out to dinner. We have our anniversary in a couple of days, but I cannot tell you how many times from the process of making it to then doing the print drop, getting the website ready, that in my head, David, you're going to look foolish. My wife told me, David, you're going to be lucky if you sold like 4 of these. I'll be proud of you, but please, because she saw how hard I was working. She was like, don't get your hopes up. Like this, there aren't going to be a bunch of people lined up to buy this print, David. It's not real life. And that's this false paradigm, right? As artists, especially. Oh gosh, I see it all over I saw this one reel recently where this guy says, he was from Canada, and he said, it is impossible to make a living as an artist, as a painter, like point blank. It is impossible. And I didn't say anything in the comments, but I'm glad some other artists chimed in. But we are so indoctrinated as artists that it is totally impossible to do it. And after that, and of course, I'd share the success with others, friends and family. I mean, no one really could believe it. I could barely believe it. But as I mentioned, there was another artist, this guy, Jeremy Guez. He sells over 1,000 of these when he does a drop. So I was like, why not? I didn't understand at that time, like how many landing page views I needed to convert. What's the conversion rate of the website? I didn't understand all the intricacies of all that. There was just a lot of people. I mean, I couldn't believe for those 48 hours there were people just from all over that were ordering it. And so I think there were a lot of people that shared with others. And the way you typically should do a really proper art drop is you're getting people to an email list. And then for almost 3 weeks, you're really building up to that drop. And so again, more of a perfect storm where I was able to get into the media. So it's also the element that the artwork was really strong. That was the big spike I saw. I remember posting it and it broke 1,000. And I think my highest that I had was around 500 or 600. So it almost doubled. So the work was just stronger. And that ended up becoming my sort of trademark, which I still do, is this drone zoom out where it's little me and I'm doing some finishing touches and the drone zooms out and then you see the whole piece. And that translated extremely well to now where reels and videos are so prevalent and important. And my work, given that formula, now has traveled around the world. And that's how the biggest brands reach out to me, because they've seen these drone zoom outs of my work.
For David, sharing his work online isn't just about visibility. It's about crafting a narrative. Each reel is a story, not only of the piece itself, but of the moment, the mood, and the meaning behind it. With roots in both visual art and filmmaking, this process invites the viewer into a fuller experience. Here's how he thinks about building that world.
So, well, number one, for every artist, I want to make this applicable. You got to find what they call the unfair advantage, which is what is the most satisfying, unique part of your work. For me, if I started from the top and you could see the work and it slowly came down, I think that would be effective. But I did this intuitively because I like filmmaking and stuff. Was the first 3 seconds, what's the hook, right? And this goes maybe to more strategy, because it could be night and day now where an artist understands what is their unique aspect about their work, how they can highlight that, and literally from a specific angle, lighting, they can highlight that. And we see that now, which unfortunately, it can become a bit gimmicky. And so I don't know who the first artist is who held up their canvas and slowly turned it around for the hook. Is there a way that you can highlight your work? I try to do that in a very honest, really raw, like just in a non-gimmicky way. And for me, it was, now I've refined it even further, because I know the opening shot for me is if I'm walking on my piece and it's a 45-degree angle, that first frame. So I almost think of not even the first 3 seconds. What's the first frame? If your first opening shot is a photograph, what is that? And can that really encapsulate your work? And so now I've gotten it down to every single work. Ideally, we're trying to share, I call it your key content pillars. Now I'll add this sort of very raw, like just me voiceover narrative of what this piece means to me. There'll be another reel where it's more of the how, like what's the adventure behind it? And so for other artists, what are your screw ups? I have one reel that went pretty viral about the piece I did on ice and it cracked, and I was never going to share it. I thought I screwed up, and I got really vulnerable and shared with my audience like how I was never going to share that. But actually that became the sort of cornerstone to which I made a series called Fractured, which that's really where my art went more global. As I did a series on the ice flows in the Baltic Sea here in Finland. And now I was naturally interested in video photography. That was just an extension of my work. See, now artists, they hate to do it because it's not an extension of their work. The way I think of it is like, if someone was to do a movie about me, or if someone was to do a movie about you as an artist, what would be the set? What would be the lighting? What's the soundtrack? What's the music? Don't just make another reel. Make and build your world. That was also transformative. I realized I don't care about being an artist anymore. I'm going to build my world. Too many artists see something like posting on social media as not an extension of their world and of their practice. If I get an artist to fall in love just a bit with the photo video process, and then they go into the editing and it's not just I have to do this. It's like, I get to craft my world. I personally really love that. And it's also because it gives you a break. And so I go in stages where I create the art, then I work and I craft the world and story behind it. What are the experiences? And that's through photo and video. Then I move into the sharing stage, and that's when I'm crafting these specific posts and how I want to share it. That's building the email list. Then I go and move into the quote unquote sales where you find like, what's the art drop going to be? Is it going to be prints available? And so all of those different steps, designing the website, that's for me, it's all art. And some artists, I think they just really want to paint. But if they could see that the potential of all of those aspects being an extension of their process.
As David's work gained momentum, so did the opportunities and the pressure to keep saying yes. But when artistic freedom starts to bend under outside demands, the cost isn't just creative. In the next part, he shares what happens when you lose sight of your core values and how he almost did.
So last year was a huge year for me. I did a quote unquote more personal series where I did some works on the Baltic Sea on the ice in the beginning of the year. The rest of the year was all brand public art projects, which is great. There is, in every single one of those projects, maybe besides one, which is a really cool collaboration I did with Lexus, where we went to the deserts of Moab, where they gave me free reign. They're like, you can choose what you want to do. When you have client and commissions, there's always going to be some level of that they're going to dictate. You don't have full artistic freedom. I've been actually shocked at how much artistic freedom they'll give me, but you never have quite full artistic freedom. The problem with doing, of course, too many, I didn't have the bandwidth to then just be like, oh, well, I'm going to do something for me now. And I'm going to do a personal project for me. I have 3 kids. I'm just away for so much of the year. But really understanding the initial sort of principle of your ethos, your why, go back to that initial reason why I go out and make this work. What's the big why for me? Which for me, it's an otherworldly experience, being able to create in some of these locations that are really remote and just feel like you're on another planet. And it's a spiritual experience. When you're using natural materials and you're in that context and it washes away like in front of your eyes, it's a profound experience. When it starts to become, of course, brands, public art, they'll take notice. It could get into big news and media. It becomes too monetized, right? Then something about the core and the spirit of the work does change, right? And so I find that selling my prints, that's all totally aligned, but doing too many projects that just pull you away. So I was actually very close. There was a very big client that came to me early in the year and was going to pay me a ridiculous amount of money to do a piece. And it was not aligned with what I was about. It was, the themes and everything was just not, I could not get behind it. It was tempting. And I think if I would have taken it, my bank account would have been happy, but there's something about, gain the world, lose your soul type situation. If it's not aligned with who you are and your morals, then it could be really dangerous. And so I think there's something to be said about doing too many projects that don't align with who you are and what you believe in.
David shares how powerful collaborations have shaped his journey, from global brands to an extraordinary project in Saudi Arabia's ancient heritage site. But beyond the spotlight, he follows a deeper instinct, choosing work that truly aligns with his values and creative vision.
Recently, I collaborated with Apple TV Plus for one of their shows. That was about a year and a half ago. Collaborated with Lexus. I just collaborated with Adidas a couple months ago. One of the most powerful projects, or ones that I really felt was kind of miraculous that we pulled off, was a project in Alula, Saudi Arabia. And it was a project for a heritage project. The location is a World Heritage Site of these rock-cut tombs built by the Nabatean people like 2,000 years ago. So it kind of felt like being in like an Indiana Jones film. It was crazy to be there, and the location was wild. And I created these 2 like hands cradling this tomb and Hegra in this area called Castle Al-Farid, this lonely castle, which is a very famous spot to visit. And it was one of the wildest adventures to be able to pull it off. I mean, each hand is like over 100 meters long. We ended up having to source everything locally because all of our pigments got stuck in customs. It was just absolutely wild. And to pull off that piece, it was something very special. I think less and less now about the collaborations I do. It's very interesting. I think as cliche as it sounds, when you're really following your gut, you're really following your instincts, if something really doesn't feel right, and again, it doesn't align with you, I'd stay away from it. But I'm not that strategic where I'm like, I'm going to reach out to X brand in order to move my professional career forward. I always try to get realigned with who I am, what do I want to produce in the world, and what's happening to me emotionally, and how could I translate that into the work. For me, that's evergreen.
this is an inspiration for anyone getting the chance to listen to this. Any parting words before we wrap it up?
Guys, keep at it. No matter where you're at, I would just say the perseverance is the number one. And don't chase the monetary, the money bit. That part comes after making work that you truly are so compelled to make. There's something inside of it that has to come out. Chase that work, and I believe the audience and people that will resonate and emotionally connect will find the work. And don't be afraid to share the work. Don't be afraid to do that.
David Popa's journey is a powerful reminder that staying true to your vision can lead to groundbreaking artistry. By blending fine art, nature, and adventure, he has created a unique practice that not only resonates deeply, but also challenges traditional boundaries of art. His story is a testament to the transformative power of courage, persistence, and creative exploration. Whether through his breathtaking earth frescoes or his ability to connect with audiences worldwide, David demonstrates that meaningful, impactful art thrives when rooted in authenticity and passion. This podcast grows because people like you share it. So if you got value today, if it inspired you to think differently or take action, hit follow or subscribe and send it to one person who needs to hear it. That's how we keep making more episodes. Thank you for listening to the Professional Artist Podcast. And until next time.